Dear friends, it is with a full heart that I give you this speech today. Can you believe it? You have arrived. Many of you knew you would. A few of you perhaps had your moments of doubt, but here you all are. To be honest, I have struggled mightily getting all my thoughts down on paper. I was going to tell you how many drafts of this speech I went through, but I can't tell you because I don't know. That's how many. Just so you know, we English teachers practice what we preach. I brainstormed, outlined, wrote some rough drafts, threw them out, wrote some more rough drafts, got a peer edit, thank you, Miss Highland, and here we stand. And why so much? This is not insignificant to give this speech. It is to me and to any of your teachers a great honor to be asked to do it. It is also, therefore, a pretty big responsibility. For me to give it to you, it also feels like a big responsibility because I personally have so much love and admiration for your class. You guys are more like me than I think you realize. And because of that, plus the way you've let me into your lives, what's a spider? Over the past 4 years, I really deeply appreciate the chance to speak before you today. The last time I did a graduation speech was, in fact, in 2002, when one of my current colleagues was sitting where you are sitting today. This I mention in part because my connection with your class runs back that far. That was my first year as senior homeroom teacher, and so I remember some of you from even way back then when you were just little tiny things sitting on your buddies' laps. I do actually remember you from then, just as I remember even more of you from lower school holiday programs or middle school science Olympiad morning X's. I have an even further back connection with your class, in fact, because as I think you know, one set of parents from this class were my teachers when I was your age, and it's because of them that I am at North Shore and standing before you today. Life is so amazingly and bizarrely interconnected, and the universe is so infinitely vast, and yet, 20 years from now, who knows how we might still be connected. So there are a few things I wanted to say to you today. Actually, there are about 1 million things. One of the reasons there were so many drafts of this speech is that I had so many things I wanted to say. The first time I spoke, I had no idea what to say, and it took all this mentoring from one of my colleagues to get there. But now I have so much. And then on the other hand, I've also struggled with not really wanting to talk a lot. I don't love to go on too long, and I don't like to give advice, and I'd really much rather you all did all the talking. In fact, the greatest joy of being an English teacher is that I get to hear people's stories all the time. I am totally immersed in stories, both fictional and non, although we could have another good discussion about how maybe they're the same thing. But what I'd really like to do is to sit down with each one of you and just have a conversation. Wouldn't that be cool? But I guess it wouldn't make a very good ceremony, and it would take a long time to get through. In the end, I decided to think of this as a letter to you, because you always need to find the right prompt. Because there are things I'd like to say to you. More than anything, there are a few gifts I'd like to give you before you go off into the world. As I told at least one of you this year, and maybe more, your words are gifts you give other people. Any piece of writing or speaking that's meant for an audience, that's a gift for someone. So these words, friends, are my gifts to you. Word 1, compassion. When we talk about compassion, I actually like to start with the term human-heartedness, which is a rough translation of a concept from Confucianism. It holds the same idea, but because it's not a word we always use, it makes us think. To talk about compassion itself, I think we have to talk about the meaning of the word. In popular speech, it's often used to mean pity or sympathy, but we really have to look at its roots. As you may remember from your 10th grade vocabulary book, the root com, con, call, core means, anybody? Good job. Together or with. It's the same root we find in communication, communion, connection, correlation, and significantly, community. And while I will not ask you for more examples, I bet you could come up with them. So compassion really means a feeling you have with someone else. It's a really key concept to me because I believe if we really think about together feeling or with feeling or human-heartedness, we can start to find a way to make these concepts more vital in our day-to-day lives. It's one of those things that's easy to say but harder to do. It's easy to say, be compassionate. It's harder not to yell from the confines of your car at that dude who just cut you off. Since you never see him, it's easy to ignore his humanity. But compassion doesn't mean pick and choose. Compassion means taking a deep breath, even when it doesn't seem to matter. It's also often easy for us to show compassion towards people who are obviously suffering, whether close or far away. People who are in poverty, who don't have basic needs, who are suffering in some way, of course we should be compassionate towards them. This is kind of a no-brainer, and it's the basis of a lot of the service work we do. Service work is deeply important, and it's a way we're going to change the world. But compassion also has to start where we are. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it's harder to be compassionate to the people who are around me all the time than it is towards people I don't have to interact with. Like, take those people you live with. It's not always easy to be compassionate towards the people we see day in and day out. So I mentioned before some things that have changed in my life since last time I made a graduation speech, and then one of those things is that I got married and had kids. And let me tell you right now, don't take this the wrong way, nothing will challenge your ability to be compassionate like having children. They will bring you off your moral high horse and remind you that you still have work to do. You may think you are a pretty patient and compassionate person. You will be wrong. Conversely, there is no greater love than what parents have for children. People told me this before I had my own, and I got it, but I didn't get it. This, of course, is a cliche to you all right now, but I'm saying it for your parents. And I want to give a shout out to them for their love for you, for all the ways they have shown you compassion or struggled to do so in getting to this point. You graduates may or may not have your own children, but whether you do or not, there will be children in your lives, and they will help you to see what is best and worst in yourself and inspire you to be better. So I think this is something we all feel easily. Those people who are around all the time, parents, siblings, children, classmates, friends, colleagues, of course we love those people, and of course they sometimes make us crazy. But we have to remember we're in it together. If we want folks to be kind to us, I think we have to do it in return. And honestly, we need to be compassionate towards ourselves as well. You guys are a really great class, a really driven, high-powered, competitive class. And I know all too well that sometimes we get there at the expense of kindness towards ourselves. I may have told some of you the story of how when I was a senior in high school, I gave myself a week's worth of stress migraines and then threw out my back in the pursuit of my own academic pride. I feel lucky that I realized then, helped by some really human-hearted teachers, that sacrificing my health wasn't worth it, and that I needed to make a change. Being driven is excellent. Being motivated, being invested in what you're doing, all fantastic. And some of you really have this. But you have to take care of yourselves too. You have to treat yourself the way you would treat other people. Some of you have this figured out, but it's not always easy. And it's not always easy to balance the tension of self versus others. That's another thing, I guess. Life is full of contradictions, of tensions. We have to balance being compassionate while still holding ourselves and others to high standards, like not tolerating injustice. We have to be good enough to ourselves to be healthy, while not becoming so self-centered that we're the be-all and end-all. Contradictions, I think, are deeply important. As a society, we're fairly either-or. We really want people to choose. You aren't supposed to be, for example, happy and sad at the same time. But on a day like this, right? You have to be. We're all so joyful for you seniors. We're ecstatic that this time has come. And simultaneously, it's bittersweet. And some of us are very profoundly sad that you're moving on. I expect you feel this way too. I actually quite like these contradictions, these paradoxes. I like how we have to live with them, and I appreciate how they play off and balance each other. And the idea of learning to live with paradox leads me to word number 2, silence. To talk about silence, I'd actually like to start with a little bit about the Buddha. When we teach about Buddhism in comparative world religions class, Mr. Deshilly explains that after the Buddha reached enlightenment, he described his state as being awake. What does it mean to be awake? We might not be enlightened yet, but I think we can still use this term and the concept in our regular lives. For us, literally, it means not to be asleep, but maybe the closest other word we use is aware. I personally like the term awake better than aware because, again, awake is a different kind of language than we usually use. We use awareness for about 100 different things, and we say other kind of cliched things like be in the moment or live in the present or carpe diem, which I can only hear in Robin Williams' creepy Dead Poet Society voice, if you know what I'm talking about. Awake, we pretty much just use in a literal sense, but because of that, when we use it as a metaphor, it really makes us think. So, for me, one of the main ways we can access awakeness is by being quiet and listening. We spend so very little time being silent in our day-to-day lives that any moment kept absolutely quiet can really have the effect of making us take notice and be present, be aware of the moment that we're in. Silence as a tool can be pretty transformative, and this is something I rediscovered on my sabbatical last spring. I spent a lot of time being quiet and by myself or surrounded by nature. It gave me a sense of peace and a sense of being hyper-aware of the world around me and the interconnections I had with other creatures. Sometimes silence pops up when you're not expecting it. I remember a time in jazz band at summer camp, early in high school. I totally loved jazz band. I was not very good at it, but we had an awesome teacher, a woman who I completely admired at the time. And just like many high school jazz band teachers, she always gave us the opportunity for solos. So we'd go around and everyone take 8 bars or 4 bars or whatever. Do you know how this goes? You've seen this happen in the concerts, right? So one time in rehearsal, we were going through our solos, and we got to the drummer. Now, I don't know how much you know about high school jazz band drummers, and I mean no disrespect, because playing drums, especially drum kit, is like I can never have the coordination. So, but the whole goal of a high school jazz band drummer is to take the loudest possible solo and bang on every single drum that you can't normally play when you're just supposed to be keeping time. So she's giving out the order of solos, and she gets to the drummer and she says, when it's your turn, I want you to try something. Just stop playing. And you could see his face fall, like, oh no, my solo. And she said, I just want you to sit there. You can cross your arms, you can turn your back to the audience, just don't play. So he did it. He did it in rehearsal, and then, because it was the most glorious drum solo in all of history, he did it in the performance. And you know what? 16 bars of silence. And you know what? I remember that moment of rehearsal more than any other moment of rehearsal ever in my life. Why? Because not only I, but we were all so present, so attuned to that silence in the midst of noise, of the beautiful juxtaposition of music and stillness. So, a story about my wedding. A wedding is a big thing, kind of like a graduation or a Thanksgiving meal, where you put a lot of energy into planning it and getting ready for it, and then the actual thing's over in like an hour, and that's that. I don't actually remember a lot of details from my wedding, besides just the general feeling of love and happiness and family being together. However, there is one clear part that I do remember. My husband and I had a Buddhist ceremony in the tradition of his family, but part of me had always wanted a Quaker wedding. Our Buddhist priest is very open to incorporating elements of Quakerism into the ceremony, specifically the period of silence that's at the core of any Quaker wedding. So right in the middle of the service, we paused, not just for a few moments, but for a full 10 minutes of silence, and people were invited to speak into the silence if they wished. With absolute clarity, I can remember sitting there in front of my friends and family. For those 10 minutes, I was able to sit and just be absolutely present. I treasure that moment of my wedding as much as seeing my husband's face light up, as much as exchanging vows and rings. A lot happened in that silent space, and it was a gift to me to be able to experience it. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask that we spend 10 minutes of graduation in silence, but I did think it would be nice to give us all a taste. I actually wanted to do this in the morning X I did about my sabbatical, but I didn't think I could pull it off with 500 kids ages 4 through 18 sitting in the gym together. So I am confident sitting here with 500 of you will totally be able to do it. So what I'd like to do is to create a silent space here just for less than a minute. I know this will make some of you antsy, that you are eager to get on with the ceremony, with diplomas and parties and weekends and summer and college and jobs and families, and well, that's the point, isn't it? That our desire to get to all those things takes us out of being present in this moment. But I'm going to ask that we give these graduating seniors this small gift, a gift which is paradoxically not about words, but about the absence of words, the gift of being absolutely present in this moment, which is not going to come again. I will keep track of time. I will not let it go on too long, I promise. I just ask that you be aware of sitting here, of sitting next to the people you're sitting next to, of being in this beautiful new auditorium, and seniors, at being in this particular moment in your lives, up on stage with these other young people with whom you've spent 2 or 4 or 14 years, and just being. Look for your parents in the audience, or look at the light coming in through the windows, or be aware of the people breathing around you, or just close your eyes. Ready? Go. Thank you for doing that. Okay, one more gift, and then one more little point after that. Your third word, yourselves. Yourselves. Whatever lies at the core of who you are, yourselves are amazing. I mean, being alive, being a human, this is incredible, right? And seeing you be the individuals that you are and grow into your authentic selves, this is incredibly fulfilling for me, and if I may speak for them, for all of your teachers as well. I realized on Tuesday night watching the senior slideshow that while I find the tiny baby pictures really cute, the photos that really, really get me, like make me teary, are the toddler pictures. Something happens when kids are 2 or 3 where they really start to look like themselves. And let me tell you, they really start to show their personalities too. Those photos, they are windows into the core of you, how you began to be yourselves. They're a precious glimpse into the past, into how your parents saw you as that tiny person. And I can easily imagine not just how you must have looked and moved in some version of how you now look and move, but how those little bits of your personality were developing as well. How you were already responsible, or laid back, or high-strung, or kind, or loud, or reserved, or how you could or could not sit still, or how you loved animals, or football, or performing, or words. That core of you, we see it early. Your family saw it emerge when you were 2 or 1 or earlier, and your teachers, so many of them here today, joined in and saw it grow even more when you were 4 or 8 or 13 or 17. That core of yourself, that's what you give to the world. You bring it to school and you give it to the people you love. We are letting you go now so that you can give it to the larger world. And in many ways you already have. You all being yourselves, that's a really big gift that you give to us. I remember very distinctly after a particularly good class discussion this year, and I know many of your other teachers must have felt this way at times. I remember thinking, wow, people are always putting you in the future tense, like your generation will do such and such, and when you become adults you will, and whatever. But I just wanted to shout, no. These students are not future tense, they are present tense. I did not say this to you at the time in the way that your parents can't say to you every day how wonderful they think you are, even though they do. I wanted to say to you, friends, you are not going to be something someday. You are not going to make something of yourselves. You are already something. You are so yourselves already, and those selves are whole and interesting and full of life to live and give to the world. You can maybe see why I didn't say it at the time. There are things you can't just say out of the blue on a Thursday afternoon, because it's like saying I love you on the first date, even when you already know it's true. But now I get to say it. You are already something. This is not to say you are perfect. None of us is perfect, and we all have things to learn. This is another of those contradictions that I think is so very precious, that we are simultaneously whole and imperfect. We are awesome, yes. We are not finished yet, yes. That's the blessing of being human, friends. So you all, in your somethingness, you astound me with your ability to think critically and sensitively, with your deep pondering about what it means to be a citizen of the world, with your intellectual and emotional gifts. I cannot count the number of days I finish class and think, I have seriously the best job in the world. Where else do you get to hear people honestly say what they think and share their real stories with you day after day after day? The poet Mary Oliver, in a poem entitled Snake, says this: there are so many stories more beautiful than answers. Not that there's anything wrong with answers, but stories. I guess I have to think this, being an English teacher. But the older I get, the longer I do this, the more I just want to sit and hear the stories of other people. You, my friends, have some phenomenal stories. Some of them are beautiful, or joyful, or devastatingly sad, but they all have value. Last, a word on friends. Those of you who are in my class this year laughed at me, not in a mean way, but pretty regularly, about the fact that I call you all friends, as in, okay, friends, let's get out our Hamlet books, or papers in, friends. You should know this. Much as you treasure your relationships with your kindergarten buddies, I treasure my relationship with my kindergarten colleagues who teach your buddies, and I totally pick this up from them. So what does it mean when I do this? Let's be clear, it's not because you're like my friends in the traditional sense. I mean, we don't hang out or go to the movies or anything. And as you told me more than once this year, I'm kind of like all of your mom. So, for me, the habit of calling you friends, well, it's not something I started intentionally, kind of encapsulates the way I feel about my students in general. That we're friendly, that we're going to work to understand each other. If I can be pedantic for one more minute, friend is also what Quakers traditionally call each other. It's kind of a long story where it comes from, but in practice, like in traditional Quaker communities, people really are friend so-and-so. Like I'd be friend Drea, and the guys sitting behind me would be friend Tom and friend Dave. And there again, it doesn't so much mean that you are friends, but it means that you're part of a community together. you're engaged in this kind of collective search for something real, for something true. It refers to the fact that we're all in this together. So for me, the confluence of friends being something I picked up from the kindergarten and from being in a community kind of works for me. When someone is our friend, we always give them the benefit of the doubt, and we expect that they're doing the best they can at that moment. We help them out if they're struggling, and we celebrate joys and accomplishments together. This is how I feel about you, and I think this is how you feel about being in this community as well. We are friends when we are compassionate towards each other. We are friends when we are in the present moment, when we are awake together. We are friends when we realize the imperfect wholeness of the people around us every day. And friends, we are friends when we can share each other's stories. Many nights when I put my little boys to bed, we do gratefuls. Gratefuls are as simple as they sound. A chance for us to share something we're grateful about with each other. They range from superficial things like someone had a fruit roll-up at snack to more profound ideas like gratitude for family or life. This evening, seniors, I am grateful for and to you. I am grateful for your kindness, your work ethic, your high standards, your openness, your humor, your intellectualism, your creativity, your bravery, your strength, your friendship to each other, your dedication to this community and to service, and your stories. And I am grateful to you for being my friends. Thank you.